Welcome back to the Meg and Amy show. Hey, Meg.
Hey, Amy.
How are you doing today?
Doing so well, especially because we're not actually here right now.
We aren't here, are we? That's
No.
kind of weird. Are we AI generated?
How are people hearing us?
Well, in fact, we are taking vacation. However, we have gotten such great feedback on our Leadership Corner segments that we thought we would create a quick compilation of those segments and create our very first Meg and Amy show clip show.
Are you tired of talent and HR podcasts that sound like corporate training videos? Same. Talentless is the no-fluff show about hiring, leadership, culture, and what's actually going on in the world of work. Talentless is a podcast for recruiters by recruiters. Hosted by Desiree Goldie and Ashley King, they're smart, occasionally salty, and never afraid to say what everyone else is thinking. Listen wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe at talentlesspodcast.com.
I am a new executive at a big company. I have never worked at a big company before. I've always run my own companies. What do I need to know or do in order to succeed?
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think there's a couple big things that are unique in large companies versus small companies. But information capture and sharing, as well as stakeholder management, is just an entirely different set of skills in a small company versus a large company. In a large company, there are formal and informal types of information flows. And in order to really get stuff done in a big company, you have to be part of both. And not just as a receiver, but also as a participant and a value creator in that. So what I advise people when they go to a big company is to first have a large dose of humility and be truly interested in all of the people there, not just the people that are going to work for you or that care about you getting your work done. Spend more time getting to know people who are not affiliated with your work and understand what they're doing, understand what they care about, and understand where they get their information to do good work. This will give you a lot of clues into the unwritten power structures. It will give you a lot of clues into how information flows, and it will hopefully set you up for building the kind of foundational relationships you need to be able to get stuff done in a big company, which does often require more influence skills versus just your own capabilities.
Always brilliant. So what I would say is that, if you're running your own company or you're, part of a small company, obviously relationships are super important, but they're all kind of external, right? Your customers, your clients, your stakeholders, board members. So relationships are really important when you are part of a small company. But they're also really important as a big company. It's just that more of those relationships are inside the company than outside the company, right? So of course, customers matter a ton, your stakeholders, your influencers, etc. But building those internal relationships and making sure that they're well balanced, that you're bringing badassery, but you're also bringing likability all at the same time is really important.
Hey, what is your tip for likability, Amy? Because there was an interesting thread on, hey, it's better to be value-oriented than likable. Our good friend Adam Grant put that. And I had a bit of a reaction to that, knowing that there's a gendered element to the likability. So what does it mean to you when you recommend to people to be likable?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Meg. I think caring about what other people think and what other people are doing and what they're about is what makes someone likable, right? And so kind of back to what you were saying, if you just isolate yourself into your small team, your small org, just the people who work for you and maybe your peers and that sort of thing, you can get by for a little while. But if you're not out there interested and caring about, the broader landscape of the company, your executive peers way over here and their subordinates and counterparts and so on, then you are going to be seen as really only in it for yourself, and that starts to leak over into values, right? So you can project through likability, through caring about others, through caring about what people do, you can project your values of, I'm actually about the overall business and not just about myself.
So I think the broader story in a big company is that you need to play a longer game in your own definition of success, and it will take more at the beginning, but then it will yield more over time because you have the opportunity to impact in a way in a large company that you don't in a small company. You end up in rooms and in with opportunities that you wouldn't have in a small company. So you need to value the fact that the way you spend your time would be different.
Another executive at work is purposely dragging his feet on things and then making it out to be my fault. It is draining all my energy. How should I approach to make it stop?
I think this is maybe on brand here after what you guys have just said about my leadership style. And I would go seek to understand, why are we slowing down here? What is the purpose? You said that the individual was purposely slowing down and then blaming me. Let's focus on, why are we slowing down? Like, what's going on? Because if I can understand what's behind that person's struggle, obstacle, lack of motivation, maybe I can find a way to help, right? And that will solve, that's the root cause, so that'll solve the rest of the problem. So I think I would start with seeking to understand.
I think that I would add on to that, because that's such a smart strategy. And it's also really hard when you're feeling drained.
It's so hard. Right?
Because you're feeling like, oh, the story you're telling yourself is they're out to get me. They're just trying to diminish my role or whatever. And so even if that story is true, it's very unhelpful for you to tell yourself that story. It's much more helpful for you to tell yourself the story. Something about this is causing fear and anxiety and stress in them. And how can I better understand what that cause is so that I can mitigate it upstream? And then at the worst, I can better protect myself because I'll have more information. But at the best, I can find that shared path to achievement that helps them feel important and therefore gets them on my side and on my team.
Great answer, Meg.
It's really interesting because so Jill, your answer is so optimistic of human behavior, right? And I would tend towards that as well, but it's burned me in the past, right? Where I'm very trusting and I want to believe the best in people, but sometimes they actually are sabotaging, like truly, right? And so I like Meg's twist on it, which is like, well, first of all, you're putting it away from you. So it's not about you, it's about them. And there's probably something wrong. And then applying the kindness that you mentioned, Jill, which is, being curious about what is it, for them, but not so much so that you're making yourself more vulnerable, but ultimately protecting your own psyche. Mm-hmm. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
You two should talk more.
I agree.
I agree completely. And we should have Amy over here to help us understand what it is we actually think we know.
I am getting pressure from my board to replace a key member of my leadership team. I can understand their urgency and point of view, but I'm conflicted and concerned they are not properly considering the organizational risks of this change. What should I do?
Okay. Well, the first thing is you need to understand whether your board controls the place or not. So if you're in like a publicly held company, sometimes boards have tremendous power and influence, and sometimes they have less so. So you first need to, and if you're in a private company, like family owned, if it's a family member, they control the company. If it's not a family member, they don't. If it's private equity owned, again, some private equity firms control the firm, others just sit on the board. So it depends. But the first thing is, do they actually control the place or not? If they control it, you got to take it a little more seriously. Second, it's almost certain. The person asked, I can understand their urgency, but I'm conflicted. They might not be considering things, right? Number two, they absolutely do not have full context. There's just no way they have full context because they're not on the ground with you and things like that. So number three, the correct thing to do is you need to take the feed. Oh, and actually the other piece is sometimes when boards say things, they're just asking. Like, at both my companies, I've had board members, I've sat on boards. Sometimes you say like, I don't think our chief revenue officer is doing a good job. Sometimes that's just a way of having a conversation or saying like, how do you think that person is doing? But they're not saying you must fire the person. So what do you do with all this? Number one, assess, do they control? Are they just asking or are they directing? And depending on the answers there, you either give them more context and say, well, here's my plan, here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm not taking action today. It's probably politically correct to then say, but I'll circle back with you and keep you updated and let you know how things go. You then need to decide whether the person's worth saving. Because they might have bad data, but they could be right. And it's not unusual for them to have some good insight. So it might be the person's not worth saving. If they are, you need to put in the work to rehabilitate that person in their eyes.
And how do you do that?
Well, what I've done in the past is a couple different things. And I haven't always been successful rehabilitating folks in this way. But sometimes you hide them. So I had an executive reporting to me years ago, and a couple members of not the board, but the leadership team had written this person off completely. So I layered them under somebody else. And then the person I layered still had a great career, great job, company grew, like everything ended up well. And I never actually told the person, that's why I layered them. Other cases, it's like coaching a brand new associate in a consulting firm where you choreograph every meeting they have, you prep with them, you have to invest. I've had to invest a lot of time in some people where it's like, let's go slide by slide, let's rehearse it. What are you going to say if this comes up? I'm going to be in the room just in case. After the meeting, you debrief it. It's a lot of work. But if you know this person is good and they're just getting a bad rap, it's worth it.
So yeah.
Meg, anything to add?
I tried to cover so much ground, but there's nothing.
I completely.
So never mind. You're the new Meg. So, yeah.
No way.
So the only other things I would say is in my own experience, there is always something I'm not seeing when this is what's been presented to me. So I do tend to start with getting really curious. So spending some time with the board members with a tell me more mindset, like give me some examples. What exactly is it? Like just making sure I understand the problem they're trying to solve, because again, that can inform my what do I do next in no matter what road I take. The second thing is, I will say for myself, in the end, when I've taken longer to be decisive about a leadership change, I've always regretted it. It's always been better when I've made a leadership change. So if they're pointing out something you already know and you've just been kind of dreading the hard work it's going to be to take that next step, I think it's a useful reminder from having lived this that most of the time, if you do it right, it's better for everyone. It's better for the person who's got this like slope they're never going to achieve, where they're going to keep working harder and harder, and they've already got this weight on them that will keep them from being successful. And it's harder for me as a leader because, to Laszlo's point, you're going to spend so much time trying to augment that deficiency yourself that there's an opportunity cost to what else you're not doing in that time frame. So I guess I would start with a okay, assume they might be right. Assume that you might have to take some action. What does that mean? And then in that, if you can't come to a conclusion that they're right, you'll feel more convicted in how you convince them otherwise. But I think the first move would be assume there's some wisdom you're missing, and get really curious and set aside your own hassle and ego to be open-minded to it.
That's a better answer.
No. I was gonna summarize both of them, and I think just being really objective about the person, and then being committed to the work, whether that is the work to remove the person or the work to rehabilitate the person. But like,
also
it's
better,
going to be work no matter what.
Well, so I will reveal one. Everyone like, what's your greatest weakness? And it's always like actually something that makes them sound awesome. But one of the things that is legitimately a weakness that has actually caused me problems is I am overly loyal to the people around me, and that informs my answer to the question, which is like, initially find a way to like dodge it and push back. And so, as a practical matter, your answers are actually much better and more useful. And
but yours are human. I mean, not that Megbot isn't also human, but
no. But the thing is, as a practical matter, like it actually, like sometimes I'll talk to my wife, and in retrospect, things are always so much more clear. And I'm like, oh, had I done this would have, this would have worked out better. That would have worked out better. Like in Google and defending folks and things like that. And she always reminds me, things worked out just fine.
Yeah.
So,
no matter what.
Which I think is a really good way to think about it, that like there's lots of paths to make something work, and recognizing that you will find your way, I think is really helpful to people to like don't believe yourself too much, but also be confident that eventually you're going to figure it out. And I think that has a lot of legs to it.
My budget has been cut every year for the last 2 years. I've never heard that before. And I feel like I'm letting my team down because we can't add any resources. What do I do?
Wow, that is exactly tied to this topic.
Yeah.
I think you should start on this one.
Oh, really? Well, first you cry into your pillow. Maybe do a crossword and then cry again. That's what I would do. Well, I think that, first of all, you have to be really clear about priorities and what you can and you can't do. So it is a nice opportunity to employ the word no and to get really ruthless in terms of prioritization. So when you have all the resources in the world, you can, it's really easy to not prioritize. And that's not good, actually. So you actually want to have constraints, and even though it doesn't sound like it. And then you need to start getting crafty as well in terms of being able to get more productive, be able to use AI tools, etc. Find ways where you can, suddenly 10x your own business model and figure out ways to make your folks' energy go further. But I'm sure Meg will have even better.
A few additional ads. So I think about this a lot, because the reality is this is going to be more common than not. That if you just do the logic of revenue and profit per employee, the high value, high functioning companies are going to have smaller staff. And so to me, there's two things, and I think you hit the what to work on piece really well. I would add one other thing. We need to collectively, and you should start this with your own team, redefine how people see progression in a world where progression is not how many people you have, and redefine what is an achievement, right? So oftentimes we use size of org as a proxy for experience and expertise. But to me, in this new world, that's completely upside down. If it takes you 100 people to build a cool tool and it takes me 5, I should be much more valuable as a leader than you. And again, teaching your team that is where the value for them and the career benefit for them is capturing that momentum and showing that you can 10x your own group and your own way of doing work. So I'm a big fan of the Patty Azzarello belief, do less with less, don't do more, don't try to do the same when you have less resources, but figure out where you get the biggest levers for value and figure out how you can celebrate progress that isn't tied to headcount addition in your team, because it's oftentimes the psychological bit that is the hardest to manage versus the actual workload. But people confuse the two and often will talk about workload when they really mean, I feel like you're diminishing my role because I don't have as many direct reports.
All right. It's official. Next time you go first and I will say ditto. With the current trend of layoffs affecting our industry, I'm curious about how leaders handle the difficult decisions of whom to let go. While it's straightforward to address low performers, the reality is that cuts often extend to potentially high performers as well. This becomes even more complex when the directive comes from higher up, such as a board or CEO, rather than being a decision initiated by the leader themselves. You've never had to execute on a layoff, have you, Meg?
Yeah.
How many times do you think?
Oh, good Lord.
I don't know.
Far too many.
Definitely.
I think if I were to net it out, I would say it's probably been like every other year of my leadership life. So a couple things. I do think it's important in this moment that there's probably 2 sets of listeners that are tackling this, right? There's the listeners who maybe have recently either been let go themselves or, have somebody really close to them that's been let go. And there's a ton of emotion and stuff to work on there. And then there's the people that got handed make a decision, which is what this question is asking. I would like to speak to both just a little bit because I feel like this is a big topic. So number one, the reality is that it probably at some point in your career, potentially multiple times, this will happen to you. And I think it is very, very important to recognize that this is not a failing of your skills or abilities, and this is not an indictment on your ability to be a great worker. This is an indication of market complexity and bad luck or bad timing or wherever you happen to be in that moment. And so I want to remind all of us, and this is people making these choices and people impacted by these choices, that I have yet to see this experience happen where eventually, as the entire story plays out and the person ends up doing whatever they end up doing next, that they did not find some benefit for having had these kinds of changes.
Yeah.
It does work out. And I say this not to diminish the choice of having to choose who goes, but it is helpful to remind yourself that, there is opportunity and it does work out for people. And so while it's awful and it's difficult and it's emotional, it is also something that you really can benefit from saying, what will this look like a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Because I think that gives you some grounding and context. So I just want to start there and then I'll go more. I don't know, Amy, if you want to reflect on that part of it.
Yeah, I think that's really, really well stated, Meg. I'm obviously always a fan of whatever you say most of the time. I mean, other than, when you're bugging me, but but generally speaking, really good. Yeah, I like that very optimistic attitude. just, in terms of like how we make decisions, right? I mean, so, you've probably heard of the, like, who would you keep in the boat, in a life-saving situation. And that's kind of the ideal scenario, but it's really difficult because, in my experience as a manager or as a leader, like everyone in the boat has a different set of talents and a different set of strengths. And it's not, sure, there might be like the one 10x person, but whatever, that's one person out of a 10-person boat, and you need to reduce by 2 people. Obviously that 10x person isn't going to go, but like who of the other 9? All of the other 9 have incredible strengths. They have incredible talents. They're making your team better, etc. It's possible there might be one that is struggling, and that's obvious, but if you need 2 more, who are those going to be? And that's really hard. So what I have done in the past is to look at, I guess, to some degree what Meg was saying, is who is potentially going to benefit from this. Because I, as a leader, I am a leader of that person for life, not for just this job, right? I mean, obviously I want my boat to have great outcomes, but I don't necessarily, losing one strength versus another is, it's going to affect the boat one way or another. So, I look at, okay, well, who might actually benefit from leaving, right? Whether it's because they've been there a long time.
They've outgrown their role, yeah.
They need a new experience, or maybe there's just kind of like not the best fit, or they're, maybe they're a little burnt out, or, like just something like those kinds of intangibles, I would say, are a bit of how I'm looking at it. So that would be kind of like my compassionate coach approach to selecting those individuals, and even so, it's super hard.
It's super hard, and I would say a couple other things. It's never like, no matter what seat you sit in, you're never in the, oh yes, I want to get rid of 3 people mindset. In fact, you're always, there is a forcing function that's outside of your own comfort zone. So first off, like, I think just acknowledging that is important. It will always be really hard, number 1. Number 2, I think, to Amy's point, understanding what's the best future for the people that work for you matters. I think the other thing is what is the challenge ahead of you, not the challenge you've had up until now. And so oftentimes, if it's significantly a big problem, what I will do is I will spend a lot of time getting grounded on what am I going to do differently with a smaller team, because it's going to be less and it's probably going to be different. And who do I need to help achieve that new remit? And so I start also with that. What is the future place this boat has to go? And what skills and strengths and capabilities and energy do I need to help us get there? And then I'm making a decision about placing people into those new slots versus suggesting something about their work is deficient or not needed anymore.
So a bit of a Patty Azzarello reference too, which is like, figure out your future org, figure out your future setup. How are you, and that starts with like, what are the work outcomes? Again, what is it that you need to accomplish? What are the strategies, et cetera? And then figure out, okay, well, what's your org structure? And that may be just, you're a new leader, there's been a big change, or it could be that there's a layoff, some sort of triggering event to have you figure out that future org setup and who and what skills you really need for that future.
The other thing to remember is most of the time you have very little time to make these decisions. I've seen them come through where you had to figure it out in 24 hours. And so the one thing I would also encourage is that the pre-work happens well before you get handed any sort of remit, whether it's to the positive of expanding and growing a team or to the negative of reducing a team. So it is your job as a leader to get very clear on who works for you, what are they great at, where do they want to grow, where are their sort of aspirations for opportunity, and how can you best map that against this problem, so that when you're forced with this, okay, you've got 24 hours to make a decision, you're bringing more to the table than just this is where they work and this is their salary and this is how long they've been here.
I've been offered a bigger role, but with no compensation change, just a promise of a bump soon when the budget improves. As a diverse candidate, should I take this and hope it turns into a real promotion, or should I hold my ground to get paid what I'm worth? My intuition is that they will not give me the bigger job until I prove I am already doing it.
Yeah.
First off, have you ever been in this situation?
No, usually there's pay is included. That's why it seems kind of ridiculous to just, oh, I'll give you the title. And some people
maybe it's a female thing.
Yeah. No, I know. But I hear this. I hear this a lot, and I feel like it's a conundrum because you're like, on the one hand, if I get that title, I can grow into that pay. They'll pay me for it eventually. They have to because it's like based on titles. Or I could parlay that into another job somewhere else because I have that title and no one knows what my pay is. On the flip side, you get that all the time. It's like, oh, well, we'll give you something. We're not really giving you anything for it. We'll just keep you. It's a way to keep you happy so you don't quit or leave, and you don't get actually what you deserve.
By giving you more work.
Yeah, by giving you more work. And so, yes, the fighter in me says stand your ground and just like say no. And then, I mean, it's a negotiation, right? Everything's a negotiation. And I feel like if they're telling you that, then you're clearly doing the work of that to deserve the title anyway. So you should be compensated as such. But I would think that they would eventually give it to you anyway, and they'd have to pay you. So it's almost like a negotiation tactic to say no. Like, why would I take more work if you're not going to pay me for it? And then they'll come back and say, okay, actually, never mind. We found some budget for you. And miraculously, it appeared, and we'll pay you for it. But, if you are, it's kind of like, it's not a self-worth question, but it's almost like, if they treat you that way and you feel that way. Deb Lou told me this, she said, I knew someone that their manager told them that you will never be promoted here. And it's like, why would you ever work? Why would you not leave right away? Because that's a gift. If they're telling you that, you do not want to be there. If they're telling you that we're going to promote you, but we're not going to give you more pay, it's like, well, why am I here? If you don't, if that's how you value me, then I should probably go find somewhere else to work. It's like almost like a kicking the can down the road in terms of, something worse is going to happen down the road where you feel like you're really mistreated, and they're just using you for, your work, and they're not going to compensate you the way you deserve to be. If you're not getting compensated how you deserve or what you've earned, then you probably shouldn't be at that place.
I think that sometimes there is actually a reason, just having been on the other side of it, I suppose. But if I were in that position, I would, or if I were advising someone in that position, I would say, okay, you need to set a deadline. And if this deadline is not met, and it could be, something that is just an internal deadline based on what people told you, but you could also...
You should get in paper, probably, in writing, probably, too.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah. I mean, there's other ways, budget or not, you can get equity. There's other ways that can compensate you,
Yeah, exactly. And then if that deadline isn't met, like to your point, that's a perfect opportunity to leave, right? Because you have gotten more experience, you've got a better title, like you are much more marketable. And so you have gained something.
Yes.
And yes, you probably should realize that you're being taken advantage of it by the current situation.
Yeah.
But be able to parlay that. And so like the story that you need to be telling yourself is like, I did it. I'm great. I'm more valuable, and I'm going to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think I would just add a couple things, because one of my observations about this topic in particular is it's very, very gendered. And it's interesting because the advice women are always get is like they don't negotiate for pay enough or whatever. But the data actually suggests that women do negotiate, and when they do, it backfires on them more than men. And so I do think that it's important to kind of keep that in mind, but I also agree that this is a conversation starter, and you should not take the conversation as given. You should negotiate in this moment, and I think somewhere between your advice is exactly what I think I would recommend, which is say, I'm very interested in this, and I think I can do a great job in this new role. I'm very confused as to why you would want to give it to me without a compensation increase, because you couldn't get it externally with a compensation increase. Are you thinking is that exclusively because of budget, or is it because you're having doubts in my ability to do this role? Get them to be a little bit more crisp. And then the other side of it is, to Amy's point, force them into and how long would I be doing this without being compensated for the new role? Putting some of that burden back on them in a polite way to make it clear that you don't think that that's how this should go down in the first place. Yeah,
exactly.
Clarifying all up front is really important, because then when you get to that deadline, then that is when you have the conversation again, because I have been in a situation where somebody, honestly, I think nagged me every week about a raise, and and it was a guy, and I wanted to strangle him. Like I could not stand. Like I was like, dude, eventually, and it wasn't this exact scenario, right?
Yeah.
Like, but it was just. It was awful, so.
But he was so entitled to feeling like he desered it. Obviously, it's bugging
exactly. So you don't want to have to bring it up like every week, right? Really you want to be able to focus on the work, focus on the growth, and have this, this underneath and ready to kind of pull the trigger based on that upfront. So having, I think, Meg, like what you were saying, having the upfront courage to have that talk in the moment is really important to set yourself up for the future.
Yeah, and I've heard this from so many people. It's like they have the reviews, and they're like, oh, well, you're not quite, you're still missing a few things, or you're at, you'll get there, but at some point. It's like that dragging you along. If there's no timeline or time horizon, like you're saying, like have this conversation. It's like, if I'm not promoted by this time, I'm leaving. And it's like, okay, well then it's like you can't kick the can down the road anymore. But there's so many people that are taken advantage of, especially I feel like Asian Americans who are really good ICs. And like, hey, I want to be a manager. It's like, well, we like to keep you in an IC position because we think you're really good at that, and we'd rather you focus on that. But it's like, well, why? Like there's no. I feel like they're being programmed into this position that they don't even want to do anymore, but they're so good at it, and they're good worker bees, so they're going to stay there. But for me, it's like that's the worst place to be, because you clearly want something else. If you want to stay in IC, that's one thing, but if you want more for your career, you cannot stay in that position, because they clearly keep like putting the cheese in front of you and stringing you along, and it's like that's not a good place to be, because they clearly don't care about your career advancement.
Reminder for everyone to send in your questions for the Leadership Corner. And also, please subscribe and spread the word on this podcast.
I really do believe in us. So let's invent the future together.
And make every day count.